The New York Times says Biden is no flaming woke warrior, but will he be riding the abortion wave to victory in 2024? I'm Scott Ott with Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, and this episode of Right Angle is brought to you by the members at BillWhittle.com. And gentlemen, it was a clickbait headline in the New York Times that said Biden sidesteps any notion that he's a flaming woke warrior. And the thrust of the story had been that even though he is, to the left on most positions, that he's trying to, he's Catholic and he's old and he's kind of tried to not be a big campaigner for some of the issues that the people on the hard left, especially the young on the hard left, wish he were more vocal about. In any case, that's not the reason why we're talking about this. I actually managed to plow my way all the way to the bottom of this story, which is usually where you find the most interesting things, because modern journalism has lost touch with the fact that the most important thing should be at the top of the story, and then you work your way down. In this case, this should have been at the top of the story, and not for a good reason. And let me just scroll to it here. This is literally the last paragraph of this story in the New York Times. And it says this, it's quoting a lady named Ms. Bracy Sherman, who's the founder of We Testify. It's a group that shares women's stories about having abortions. And Steve Green, here's the quote that brought me up short all the way at the end of this story. The midterms, Ms. Bracy Sherman said, the midterm elections show that Americans love abortion. Abortion has a higher approval rating than he, Joe Biden, does. He, Joe Biden, should be riding the abortion wave. Steve, I don't know if I've read a more stone-cold, hellish sentence from somebody who is purporting to speak for a political bloc in this country ever. Americans love abortion. Abortion has a higher approval rating than Joe Biden. He should be riding the abortion wave. I don't know what to ask here, Steve, other than your reaction.
I'm going to need a minute. I've never heard anything quite like that. So while the back of my brain works on that, let me just say whether or not Biden actually goes out on the campaign trail and stumps for all of the woke issues. When it comes to actual policy in this White House, the only way he could be more woke is if he got a tribal tattoo, dyed his hair purple, and put in a nose ring. Which now I want to go to.
Which may happen if they leave him alone for half an hour.
Yeah, now I want to go to a generative AI and make that happen. So you know what I'll be doing this afternoon. That said, gosh, how far the Democrats have gone in the last 25 years or so. I remember when at least the DLC-style Democrats, the old Democratic Leadership Council, the centrist Democrats like Bill Clinton, like to talk about abortion being safe, legal, and rare. And now it's abortion up to the moment of birth or after. Whatever, maybe we can have this discussion if your child hasn't, if your newborn that isn't, human and hasn't decided its gender, maybe we'll just give you a few minutes alone and you can, here's a pillow. This is absolute madness where the left has gone on this. And I want to repeat something that Glenn Reynolds said several times over the last couple of years that led up to the Dobbs decision. American abortion laws, state by state, are going to be in flux for a little while, as they were before Roe versus Wade short-circuited our actual Federalist, Democratic, Republican processes. It short-circuited everything. It laid down a blanket and created a set of rules on abortion that even the most left-wing countries in Europe never went that far. And this happened, of course, through judicial fiat. And what's happening now is what normally would have happened in this country, absent Roe, in the 1970s and maybe early 80s. And it's a pretty good estimate that, give or take, some regulations here, some regulations there in some states that are just going to be completely pro-life, that on average, your typical American state would have abortion laws that are a lot more like Europe's than we had forced on us by the Roe decision 50 years ago. And this idea that you have to defend this authoritarian, thankfully now stricken Supreme Court decision from 1972 or 73 by writing an abortion wave to election victory? This is the modern American left. Not safe, legal, and rare, but how much of this can we do?
Bill Whittle, this Ms. Sherman, the founder of We Testify, says that the same way that the president often hosts championship sports teams at the White House, that he should invite women who have had abortions to come and tell their stories. And I guess I had this naive notion, like Steve said, that even the advocates for so-called women's health care were not doing so because of any relishing of the actual medical process. I mean, it's like saying Americans love open heart surgery. It may be necessary from time to time, but nobody's out there going, yeah, we love it. Except, if you make your living doing open heart surgery. But this just took things to a whole new level where she's basically saying, look, it's not enough to be essentially defending what they would consider to be women's health care, reproductive care. You need to be out there in your face saying, not only do we think we should protect a woman's right to have abortion when that exigency strikes, but we should be telling the stories of abortion victory, and we should be riding this abortion wave to electoral victory in 2024. Is she more in touch with the pulse of America than I am, Bill?
She is 100% more in touch with the pulse of progressive Democrats than you are. This is not new, and this has been going on for a long time. In fact, for 15, 20 years, you were not a woman unless you were not only accepting of abortion and Roe v. Wade, but an actual proponent of it and advocating it. If you did not advocate it, you weren't really a woman. This has been going on for actually quite a long time. Now, as far as the actual analysis goes, I think it is true that in the 2022 midterms, a lot of young women Democrats came out and voted and took what I thought was going to be a much more decisive conservative rebound than actually happened. And a number of Republicans stayed home on that one because a number of Republicans are convinced that Donald Trump is the answer to the woes of the country, when in point of fact, we're the answer to the woes of the country, and that means you got to go vote in other elections. So there's a couple things here, aside from the reprehensible moral stand, which is something I've gotten used to, that make me believe that she's wrong. The first thing I think that she's wrong about is when the 2022 midterms happened, that decision was really recent. I mean, it was a couple of weeks, wasn't it, before the election, or a month or two at the most, right? The overturning of Roe v. Wade. So they had managed to convince large numbers of single white women, who are the primary voting bloc for the Democratic Party now, that abortion was going to be illegal and we're going right straight to a handmaid's tale. That's the rhetoric they've always used. By 2024, people will have realized that there is not a tremendous, enormously different world that they live in, but I think they certainly believed they would live in that world in 2022. I think they fully believed the rhetoric that this is what's going to happen. The conservatives at the time were saying probably not much is going to change, other than to say that states are going to have a larger role in determining what that state's policy are. So the calamity that these people had told them was coming in just 2022 will not have arrived for them in 2024. And you can argue about whether that's appropriate or not. But I think the second thing that's more to the point on why this woman is wrong about this is, one thing I have noticed with astonishing clarity and a great deal of satisfaction and hope is that not the abortion issue, but the trans issue is making enemies of the Democrats' traditional progressive base, and that would be young, single women. When Joe Biden backs the trans movement as hard as he does and has Dylan Mulvaney in the White House and is talking about, trans kids being the soul of the nation and all the rest of this stuff, then what he's doing is he is planting that Democratic Party flag on a hill too far. Young women Democratic voters don't like being called chest feeders. They don't like being called birthing people. The entire women's live movement was about women's liberation, about feminism. And the trans movement is defining females out of the equation. You talk about women's rights, but then again, I'm not a biologist. Joe Biden appointed a Supreme Court justice who said, what do you think about women's issues? What's a woman? I'm not a biologist. There is no question that this push, this transgender woke push towards transgenderism, is peeling away gays and single women because the rhetoric that is being used in order to include trans people as women is excluding women, and they're not happy about it. So I think both of those things indicate that, to my utter surprise, this progressive advocate is completely wrong about everything. I've completely left the moral story out of this, but just to wrap it up, we as conservatives and Republicans we seem to be unable, constitutionally unable. I don't mean the Constitution, I mean like our internal Constitution. We seem to be constitutionally unable to argue anything at the fundamental level. When this issue was up for discussion, and when it comes up for discussion in 2024, we need to make it clear that the abortion laws that existed in the country did not exist anywhere else in the world. When people like conservative commentators do the kind of things that the Republican Party should be doing, which is doing man on the street interviews, they will ask young people, young women, and they'll say, well, what do you think about these restrictions and so on? They go, well, that's horrible, horrible. Well, those are the restrictions that France has had on abortion for the last 40 years. And this is what Switzerland has. This is what Norway has. This is what all of this stuff has. And we are not capable of saying that America, in this particular case, America was such an outlier compared to the rest of the civilized world that people look at it as if we're insane. Am I making my point here? That this idea of abortion being rare, legal, and safe right up until the time you hear the spank or afterwards, as Steve pointed out. This is not the standard of the world that this crazy repressive America has been shoving down women's throats. This is a moral outlier that other civilized Western countries that these people look up to find reprehensible. And let's not forget that the only person who's ever gone on record, major national politicians ever gone on record, in favor of terminating the life of an infant after it has been born is Barack Obama, who went on the record for that when he was a state senator in Illinois and supported that particular policy when it came up in Illinois. Now, you would think that a party of freedom would be able to articulate some of these points and fight back, but despair springs eternal if you're watching the Republican Party in action.
I know that a certain kind of person watches these videos, but I also know that in politics, a lot of people watch the other side's videos just so that they can find gotcha moments. So I'm hoping we have some people who don't already agree with us watching this video. And what I want to say to you, if you're a member of the Democratic Party, if you vote Democratic typically, if you consider yourself progressive or liberal or of the left, is that the people who are the vanguard of this party that you used to consider your home, of this movement that you used to consider familiar, are moving it in a direction that you did not anticipate. There are many solid Democrat voters in this country who consider themselves to be people of faith. And those same people would be part of a church that would say, we will do everything we can to protect human life. We'll do everything we can to make sure that babies who come into this world without proper care are cared for, that people get the right kind of medical care without injuring anybody else. And this this organization that you felt an affiliation with has moved away from that. They're now calling, as this leading voice is calling in the leading liberal newspaper in the country, is saying Americans love abortion. I mean, that to me curdled my blood. I could not imagine anybody saying that. And as I said earlier, there are many arguments I could hear somebody actually making and not coming across as a monster. But this one just shocked me. And then to go on to say abortion has a higher approval rating than Joe Biden. Well, so does root canal. So that's really not saying much. It's not making much of a claim. But then to say he should build his campaign on America's love, the word love, for abortion stuns me, particularly because the rate of abortion among black women is 5 times the rate among white women. 5 times the rate. And so when you hear somebody saying America loves abortion, and then you hear the Guttmacher Institute, which is a pro-abortion statistical organization, saying that black baby abortions run at 5 times the rate of white baby abortions, what do you hear there? Do I have to spell it out for you? I don't think so. Americans love this? That's like saying Americans love eugenics. Americans love genocide. Americans love murder. No, that's not what Americans love. And you are sorely mistaken if you take that position as a politician. And I only say this partially in jest, but I kind of hope President Biden latches onto that idea because it will mean certain defeat. He cannot win in the United States of America in 2024 with a platform that says, I'm Joe Biden, and like you, I love abortion. It is not a winning platform. It is one of the more frightening things that I have heard. If you are a black Democratic voter, I think you need to do some soul searching. You need to take some serious consideration of who you've been supporting. And there are many other reasons why you might go into some thoughtful reflection on this, but you don't want to be part of a party that wants to wipe out your own people. And that's what I'm hearing here. What do we love about abortion? Do we love that it stops a beating heart? Do we love that it ends a human life? Do we love that it weeds out people from certain racial groups? What is there to love about abortion? I encourage you to read that article if you can in the New York Times. I don't know if you have to subscribe to get it, but that article under the headline that says Biden sidesteps any notion that he's a flaming woke warrior. It appeared on July 3rd in the New York Times. And read all the way to the bottom. You need to understand what people are saying in your name. For Bill Whittle and Stephen Green, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks to the members at BillWhittle.com for making this episode of Right Angle possible.